everybody. My name is Bob Schneider, and I teach at Eastern New Mexico University in the College of Business. I teach management stuff. My specialty is leadership. I spent 20 years in the Army, and then I worked as a federal contractor for a while, and then I went and got my PhD so I could do this. I love teaching and talking about leadership. I love presenting to people who are interested in leadership, and I love talking, especially to younger folks, about issues like the one we're going to talk about today, which is linking emotional intelligence and soft skills, or taking a theory like emotional intelligence and turning it into real stuff like soft skills, which is a huge deal in today's business world. So, with that, we'll get started. Okay, what is emotional intelligence? There's an Oxford Dictionary definition. I saw many management definitions, but this one, to me, kind of encapsulated what we want to talk about. All right, it's the ability to be aware of, control, and express yourself, your emotions. All right, we all know people that will use emotions like anger as an excuse to do whatever they want. That's an issue within emotional intelligence. All right, the ability to be on an even keel for most of your life. That your highs aren't much higher than your lows are low, and they're all pretty close to the center line. People with emotional intelligence are more successful personally, and they're more successful professionally. There have been multiple studies that have been done that have, they thought what they were going to find is that people that occupied CEO, COO, general officers in the military, they thought people like that would have a high IQ. And while they probably didn't have a low IQ, their intelligence was average to slightly above average as an average. But what was high in almost every case without exception is their emotional intelligence scores. Emotional intelligence scores between men and women. Men are different at some things differently as groups than women are. There's obviously individual exceptions to everything, but as groups. And emotional intelligence is no exception to that. There's some things like, we'll get into this, but some things like empathy that women typically are a little better at than us guys are. But when you get to the top of the pyramid, when you get to those CEOs, when you get to those general officers, when you get to those people that are at the top of their professions, there's no difference between the genders when it comes to emotional intelligence. They're good at all of it, emotional intelligence. So that's a pretty good sales pitch for me, and it's what really got me interested in looking at emotional intelligence. How are we going about our daily business with relationships, because it's about what we do with interpersonal relationships. That's meaning in your personal life and at work, all right, and how you deal with those relationships. Are they healthy relationships? Are they mutually beneficial? Or do you have a give and take relationship where one is always giving and the other one's always taking? Do you have relationships with people who are emotionally explosive or emotionally unpredictable? All right, these are all things that have to do with emotional intelligence, and they're things that we can get better at, and I'll show you how. So, next, let's contrast that, or at least compare it to soft skills. All right, another Oxford Dictionary definition. And again, we're talking about things internal to you and me. We're not talking about a skill that you learn at work, like writing or working on a piece of machinery or learning a software program. We're talking about stuff that transfers with you if you change jobs. It's something that you can work on now, and it's something you keep. It's not something you leave behind because you move from being a fry cook to being a personnel manager. All right, it's stuff you have. And it's, again, interacting effectively and harmoniously with other people. Well, doggone, that seems pretty close to me, to the emotional intelligence, or I'll say EI, definition. It's different words. There's fewer words on this one, but it means the same thing to me. Let me back up. There was the EI one. Again, centers on the emotional aspects and dealing with relationships and how you deal with them. Interacting effectively and harmoniously has to do with emotions, all right, and relationships with other people. So, you can see the relationship between the two, and you can see why it makes sense to deal with the two together, but a lot of people haven't done that yet. Soft skills have been compartmentalized in the work world as something that people between the ages of about 20 and 28 don't have. 18 to 28, somewhere in that area. All right, they're accused of not having very developed soft skills. When we survey employers for our graduates, and when other big universities, very prestigious universities, survey employers of their new graduates from business schools. And I'm talking about business schools, but I think we can kind of generalize this probably to most university graduates. They're very competent in their hard skills. They're very competent in the things that they learned while they were in college. They're a computer science major. They know how to do coding. They know how to use this program and write in that program and all that kind of stuff. Nobody's questioning that. In fact, higher ed has a very good reputation for teaching those hard kind of skills. What we take a hit on is our ability to teach these soft skills. Now, I can conjecture, I can make some guesses as to why this is an issue more recently, last 10, 12, 15 years. Some people say parents have stopped teaching soft skills in a way that they used to, and now it's been advocated to schools to have to teach soft skills. That's clearly not true of everybody. I know some kids that are very good with their soft skills, and they attribute their parents to why they have good soft skills. So parents, that's kind of a challenge to you out there. One of the biggest challenges to kids right now getting into the workforce is this whole idea of soft skills and why their soft skills aren't better developed. And why, as a boss, am I getting a 22-year-old graduate with a bachelor's degree that cannot walk up to a customer, look them in the eye, shake their hand, and say, "Hi, my name is Bob Schneider, and I'd like to help you today." They just can't do it. Constitutionally incapable. Either they can't look them in the eye, or when they put their hand out to shake their hand, it's dripping with sweat, or whatever. So these soft skills are what we should be focusing more on, especially in business schools. And sadly, I don't know that we are. We are here at Eastern, but nationally, generally, the trend is still away from this. Some people blame it on technology. The fact that I joke with my teenage daughter sometimes that, I ask how her boyfriend is, and her boyfriend is her telephone, or her cell phone. I'm joking, obviously. But my generation, I don't know of anything that we kept control of in our lives like people today keep control of their cell phone. You lose your cell phone today and people freak out. They freak out. Like they just lost their child or their dog or something else. So that maybe plays into it. You can figure out why that is, but let's see about fixing it. So, here are the 5 characteristics of emotional intelligence. All right, I'll kind of go through them and define them a little bit, and then I'll tell you the 5 characteristics of soft skills, and then I'll match them up, and we'll look at how we can get better at them. So first of all is self-awareness. This has to do with things like knowing how you appear to other people. So did you ever have that teacher who thought they were hilarious, but they weren't in the least bit funny? In fact, they were irritating. And they would continue to tell jokes or think they were funny, and all they did was push you further and further away. That person had a low level of self-awareness. We used to call it insight. Insight into how the world sees me. All right, it's very important to know what your abilities are, what you're good at, what you're not good at, but especially what other people perceive you as good at and not good at. Number 2, self-regulation. Self-regulation, this has to do with that even keel of emotions. This doesn't mean you never get angry. It means when you get angry, it doesn't affect your behavior. So even though I'm super, super angry at you and I want to punch you in the nose, or I want to say something to you that I'm going to regret, self-regulation, a high level of self-regulation, keeps me from doing that. Now, I have an unfair advantage. I spent 20 years in the Army as an enlisted person, so I'm the one guy that you know in your world that can get screamed at, spit at right in his face, and won't bat an eye. But most people, that's nearly impossible. In fact, I've been critical of students because of their writing or something else for a paper they turn in, and they look at me like they want to kick my butt, like they're trying to intimidate me. And that is part of this self-regulation piece. If you're irritated, and that's okay, but it should not affect your behavior to where you're going to be perceived negatively and it's going to hurt our relationship. Remember, this is all about forming, keeping, and improving relationships. The third thing, the third of the 5 characteristics of emotional intelligence is motivation. All right? If you're not a motivating and a motivated kind of person, you're not going to go through this. And you'll see that when we get to the part of where we talk about what you can do to get better at this stuff. But if you're that bump on the log person, you're not high in emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence people that are high in emotional intelligence are excited about life. They're excited about what they do. They're excited about what they're going to do today, tomorrow, what they did yesterday. These are the people that, you come across and you're like, wow, where did they get all that energy? All right. So, next, that one's a little easier to explain. Empathy is the next one, not sympathy. Not sympathy, but empathy. All right. Sympathy is feeling sorry for somebody. Nobody needs to be felt sorry for. Just not generally a good idea. In fact, too many people today probably are felt sorry for, and it's put them in the position they are. Empathy, on the other hand, is a good thing. And empathy is if I have empathy, that means I have the ability to see your problems in your life through your eyes. Now, let me give you an example. When I was in charge of a bunch of people in the Army, and I was in my mid-30s, I would have an 18-year-old private come to me just distraught because of something that happened in their personal life. And in my mind, I'm thinking, this is stupid. You're 18 years old, you're in the Army, probably this issue is 1,000 miles away, back with some high school drama or whatever that you were dealing with, and you need to move on with your life. But what do you think would have happened if I had told them that? They'd say, oh, he's no help. And they'd have gone away and looked for somebody else. But if you sit there and you listen, and you say, wow, at 18, I remember having to deal with stuff like this. And you put yourself in their shoes, that empathy, as far as I'm concerned, is the number one indicator of high-level emotional intelligence. If you can't see other people's issues and problems through their eyes so that you can be empathetic in helping them, then you will never be high in emotional intelligence. So, empathy. Social skills is the last one. This is where you have to, this is part of that motivation thing, where if you don't have the ability to look people in the eye, to talk to them, to communicate, you're never going to have effective relationships with them. All right? Effective relationships involve shaking hands, they involve face-to-face, eye-to-eye contact, they involve being able to see people's affect, they involve all this stuff. That's why Teams and Zoom and Facebook Live and all these things have skyrocketed during this isolation syndrome we're under, or pandemic, or whatever it is. All right, because people have a need to be able to see others. Otherwise, we would just be doing audio recordings or sending out books or whatever. But we're the kind of animals that we're herd animals. We want to be around people. That's why the people that live out in the wilderness are the exception. The rest of us are the rule. Okay, so those are the 5 characteristics of emotional intelligence. Let's keep moving and talk about the top 5 soft skills. This came from Resume Genius. So this was reported to them by employers who were looking at resumes of people that got hired. All right, so this is what they ranked as the top 5. Communication, teamwork, adaptability, problem solving, and interpersonal skills. Now, those are much more self-explanatory than the 5 from emotional intelligence, but I want to talk about them a little bit. Communication is not just the ability to talk to somebody, but it's also the ability to write. All right, we're talking about written and verbal communication. This is why you take freshman English. This is why you take, second year English. This is why you have, writing classes in high school. This is a very important skill. It's ranked the top of the 5 soft skills, all right, by employers. This is the main area where they see problems with people coming out of college and high school, is that they're unable, again, like I said, to look people in the eye, to read people is a huge part of communication. To know that if somebody's fidgety and they're trying to get away from you, and you keep grabbing them, and bringing them toward you, and they're trying to get away, you're not reading the situation, you're not understanding the situation, and if you're in a client-customer relationship, that person's never going to buy anything from you. All they want to do is get away from you. All right, so communication and understanding the nonverbals and everything that goes with communication is huge. Teamwork, the ability to work with others. Man, oh man, oh man. What's going on right now is not going to help us with that. It's going to hurt us. I think if you have a tendency at all to be a loner, this thing that's going on right now is going to push you probably even more into that direction because you're comfortable with it, but you got to fight it. All right, if you want a job, you're going to have to work with other people. Even people that work from home work with other people through Teams or Zooms or Facebook or whatever. All right, so the ability to work on a team. Now, I've worked on teams virtually for decades. All right, where when I was at Lockheed, I was in San Antonio, I had somebody in El Paso, somebody in Atlanta, somebody in California, and we'd be on a project together. And this is 15 years ago, when the technology was nowhere near what it is now. We've had a lot of phone calls and a lot of emails. All right, now we can do things like this. So, when I say teamwork, it's not just because you're there locally, but the ability to network, sometimes globally. All right, adaptability. The ability to not get stuck in your ways, the ability for the government to come down and say, oh, you work in the healthcare industry and this month we're going to change this to something else, and you don't take 2 weeks complaining about it before you change it. You jump up and you know you're going to have to change it and you do it. There's a concept called a learning organization, and the way you measure an organization's ability to learn is their adaptability. All right, you're moving along fat, dumb, and happy, and all of a sudden the government changes a rule and everything stops. Well, how many days, weeks, months does it take you to get back on that same trajectory again? And that distance measurement compared one company to another within the same industries is how you measure a learning organization, their ability to adapt. So this is a huge thing right now in the world for organizations, and it's a huge thing for people because people make up organizations. So in order for an organization to be adaptable, an organization to be a learning organization, the people have to be that way first. Problem solving is the next one. The ability to solve problems. I'll tell you what, folks, when I was a boss, and those of you that have been bosses or are bosses out there, I'm almost certain you'll back me up on this. I would say slightly under half of my time, maybe 40%, 45% of my time was spent solving problems for my employees. And way more than half of those problems were things that I thought they should have been able to solve themselves most of the time. But it was much easier for them to stand in front of my desk and say, boss, what should I do? And it took me a long time to figure out that playing dumb can get you somewhere. So if you're that person that solves their own problems within reason, within an organization, your boss is going to love you. I'm surprised problem solving isn't higher up on the list. I was surprised to see it was number 4. All right, next one is interpersonal skills. You cannot establish relationships with people unless you have interpersonal skills. It just doesn't happen. Now, I'm not talking about romantic stuff. I'm not talking about who you marry. I'm not talking about who your brother or your sister is. I'm talking about people at work who can choose to interact with you or not. All right, your brother or your sister can't choose to interact with you. They will interact with you. They have to. They live in the same house. All right, but with people that you go to work with, there's oftentimes big areas. They have other people. They can avoid you, and that's not what we're going after. So interpersonal skills are very, very significant to people who run organizations. All right, let's look at the relationship between these. So I've matched up what I think is the soft skill on the left and then the emotional intelligence stuff that matches up to it on the right. So the point of this is, you can say, okay, Schneider, this all makes sense and this is all great, but what do we do about it? Well, here's the what do we do about it. Communication equals, EI equals social skills and empathy. You cannot communicate effectively with somebody unless you can see their situation through their eyes, have some understanding of what they're trying to tell you from their perspective. That's the empathy part. The social skills part is the part where you know not to interrupt, you know not to stare somebody down, you know to be polite, all that kind of stuff. So if you are working on your empathy and your social skills, your communication is naturally going to get better. So how do you do that? Well, social skills. Gee, folks, how do you get better at shooting free throws? Shoot free throws. How do you get better in social situations? You force yourself to put yourself into social situations. So you know that party at your boss's house that you really don't want to go to? You go. Not because you want to go to the party, but because you're working on this in your life and you want to get better at it. You know that situation where you could either send an email to your boss or you could get up and you could go talk to him. Get up and go talk to him. It will force you to work on your social skills, your communication skills, blah, 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 blah. Empathy is something, I have a 7-year-old daughter and I work with her on that all the time. I remember my parents working with me on empathy. As a kid, I didn't care about anybody but me and my friends. And I only cared about my friends so that they were happy so they would play with me. All right? 7-year-olds are very selfish people. It's just what they are. All right? But they're going to stay that way, folks, unless you make them change. All right? You don't grow empathetic on your own. That is a forced issue because we are generally selfish people, as human beings. So how do we teach empathy to our kids? And how do we get better at being empathetic? Well, we notice other people is one thing. So when my daughter and I are at the grocery store and I see somebody who's struggling, maybe it's an older gentleman or woman and they're at the vegetable thing and they're, they got their cane in one hand and they got their bag and they're trying to put the tomatoes in the bag. And I'll tell my daughter, I'll say, do you see that lady over there? And she's like, yeah. What is she doing? Well, she's trying to put tomatoes. Does it look like she's having a hard time? Oh, yeah, she is. Why don't you go help her? And I'll have her go help her. And then when she's done, we'll process it. It feels really plastic the first couple of times you do it, but afterwards, after you've done it a while, you feel like, wow, she got it. She understood it. And that's a 7-year-old. So I do it to myself too. I drive by somebody and it's 100 degrees out in Portales, and this actually happened, and there's this, old man walking like this down the street, and it's 100 degrees in the middle of the day. And I drive by and I'm like, man, that's stupid. Why is he out here? And I go another block and it's like, all right, and I turn around. That's practicing empathy. I didn't want to do that. It interrupted my day. I didn't want to get out of my air-conditioned car. It's 100 freaking degrees out. All right, but I did it to force myself, and when I met the gentleman and I talked to him and I heard his story and I understood, I was so happy I stopped and I took him in my car and I gave him a ride and everything else and blah, 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 blah. Empathy. All right, there's a really good book, and man, I'm losing the author's name, but the name of the book is Moral Man, Immoral Society. As individuals, when I get to know you, it's really easy for me to be empathetic. All right, so get to know people. All right, get to know people. Teamwork. Teamwork is the soft skill that we talked about that employers desire. And with emotional intelligence, that takes social skills and motivation. Why do I put those two? Well, teamwork takes social skills. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. You got to know how to, understand the whole stages of team development and this, storming, forming, norming, and all that kind of performing, all that kind of stuff, right? That's the understanding it. But then socially, you also have to be able to read people. You have to communicate, all that kind of stuff. Motivation. Why do you have to be motivated to work in a team? Because it's much harder than just doing it yourself. All right? Because you got to tolerate other people. And you have to shut up and listen while they're talking. And you have to actually listen to what they're saying and process it and make it part of what you're thinking before you respond so it doesn't look like you just ignored what was just said. All right? So all that takes energy. And if you're not motivated to be part of the process, what do? You sit there, you keep your mouth shut, and you don't say a word. All right? So motivation is a huge part of teamwork. How do you get better at it? Well, put yourself on teams, volunteer. I have this horrible thing that was developed in the military. I can't not volunteer for stuff. Somebody says, Schneider, we do it? Yeah, I'd love to do it. It drives my wife nuts. Keeps me out of the house all the time, but get yourself to that point. Be the person that volunteers. Be the person that says, I'll lead that team, or I'll be on that team, or I'll be part of that team, whatever. All right, adaptability. If you don't know what you're good at and what you're not good at, you stick to what's predictable. That should make sense. If you don't know much about yourself and what I'm good at and what I'm not good at, then I put myself in very predictable situations because I don't know my abilities. But if I'm self-aware, if I know how to control my emotions, if I know why my emotion, I teach a class where we spend a lot of time thinking or talking about why do I do what I do, why do I think what I think, kind of a metacognition kind of thing. That's what we're talking about here, all right, is I'm asked to change from doing it this way to doing it that way. Why does that bother me? Why am I so worried about am I afraid I'm going to fail? Am I afraid I'm not going to do it as well? Am I afraid it's going to be more work, less work, the product's going to suffer? Looking at all of that and understanding what is the root cause of this issue with adaptability will get you through that, and that all comes to self-awareness and that insight that we talked about before. All right, next soft skill is problem solving. When problems arise at work, the number one skill is self-regulation. Because when the problem comes up, what do you want to do? You want to yell, scream, jump up and down, blame it on somebody. You know, that's all the stuff you want to do when a problem comes. If you are more motivated and work toward the solution and control that emotion of wanting to fire somebody or hurt somebody who just caused all this extra problem, then you can work toward the motivation part of fixing the problem instead of assigning blame. Interpersonal skills. Again, empathy and social skills. Interpersonal skills are highly linked to the ability to see somebody's situation through their eyes, through their shoes. All right, and then social skills, that's got to make sense. So how do we get better at that? Again, putting yourself in those social situations and noticing those people. I also teach a whole class session on gratitude and how bosses that are grateful, I have to tie everything back to business, but that's easy because grateful bosses are always better bosses. And that's what we're talking about down here with interpersonal skills. If you're walking around angry at the world, you're walking around behind, you're always late, you always got somewhere else to be, people start to get the impression that you don't want to be around them, and they start to think that they're not important. All right? But if you're the opposite of that, and you're working on this stuff, people will want to be around you, they'll want to know what you think, and you'll want to know what they think. And then you're building relationships. Now, let me say a little bit about relationships and why that's important. To me, I always approach stuff like this with an assumption, and the assumption here is that relationships run organizations. If you don't buy into the fact that relationships run organizations, then none of this will be valuable to you. You won't see the need for any of this. If you think everybody in your organization can work in isolation and not have to interact and not have relationships with each other, then don't do this. All right. If your soft skills are such that you know you're going to be able to leave high school, leave college, or whatever, and get a job, then go do that. All right. But if you lack in this stuff, then you can work on it. You can get better at it. And good relationships are always based on trust. All right. So I shouldn't even have to say that when you're communicating honestly. One of my favorite stories from when I was in industry had to do with my boss used to have a bad habit, and what she would do is she would tell me things I wasn't supposed to know, and then she would always say, "But don't tell me." All right. So then, of course, I had a lot of people that worked for me. Somebody was bound to say, "Hey, I heard a rumor," because if my boss is talking about it, there's other people talking about it. You know how that works. I heard a rumor that this was going to happen. What do you think? And I'd say, well, you know what? At this point, I'm thinking I can either lie to the person and say, no, I've never heard anything like that before in my life. Or I can say, yeah, I did hear that, I can confirm the rumor, and I can do what my boss told me not to do and tell. Or I can tell the truth. Wow, what a rare concept. And I can tell a person, I know the answer to your question, but I've been told I can't tell you yet. And I used to think that people would freak out if you told them that. But you know what? People respect it because they know you're not lying to them. Why would you make that up as a lie? All right, so they appreciate the fact that you're being honest. I've been told, but I've been also told that I can't tell anybody else. There's nothing wrong with that. All right, so building that trust, you do that and your trust bank goes up. You know, you do something else and keep your word and your trust bank goes up. You know, but you do 99 things and you get this big pile of trust, and then you do one thing and you lose half of it or all of it depending on how bad it is. Trust is something that is mandatory in work relationships, and it's something that's been downplayed. I don't know why it's been downplayed. It's maybe something that hasn't been seen as appropriate for the workplace. We like to believe that we base how we evaluate people at work and how effective people are at work on their competencies and their skills, and their hard skills. Well, I began this by talking about that nobody's questioning U.S. hard skills. All right, the people that we graduate out of our universities are just as competent as most places around the world. There's exceptions, but generally speaking, you know, if you go to college to be a math major, you know math when you leave college. All right, but this other stuff is what seems to be missing from our product. Our product being students, all right, that we send out into the world to produce stuff. You got to remember, public universities are funded largely by taxpayer dollars. All right, so when you're paying your tax bill to the state of New Mexico at the end of the year, you should be asking yourself, am I getting my money's worth out of my universities? And I think we are with the hard skills, but this soft skill thing is really becoming a problem in our society. It really is. I obviously think it's a big deal. You have to make up your own mind on that. All right. So what are we talking about? EI is important. It's been tied in objective studies to personal and professional success. People that are successful personally and professionally will tell you EI is a big part of that. Soft skills are in demand by employers. So if you can increase your emotional intelligence, I just showed you how your soft skills will just naturally increase, and you are more employable, you are more marketable, you are more desirable at that point. All right, I'm the guy who I've always believed if I can get in the door and I can get an interview, I will get the job. And that has been true in 99% of the jobs that I've applied for. If I get in the door and I do the interview, and if I still want the job, I can get it based on the interview. And it's because of soft skills. I'm probably the least qualified guy you'll ever meet. All right, but I'm very developed in emotional intelligence just because I've paid attention to it. And because I had good parents. I have to give them some credit. All right, you can raise your EI and soft skill levels. That's the good news. That's not a typo. Soft skills, skill levels. That's kind of an awkward sentence, but you can do something about it, and we kind of talked about that. Don't overthink this. All right, these skills, we're all familiar with those soft skills that I mentioned. We're all pretty familiar with the terms and everything else. Don't overthink it. Don't create these large plastic fake scenarios. Just live life. And as that person goes by and there's an opportunity to talk, or you're standing in line next to somebody, talk to them. Talk to them, work on your social skills, work on your eye contact, work on reading them. Are they irritated because I want to talk to them? Then shut up and stop talking to them. All right, this is, you know, the guy or the gal who sits down next to you in the airplane seat, and they talk the entire flight when all you look forward to the whole flight was to be able to take a nap. And they can't pick up on that, all right? So work on those things. Don't feel bad if it doesn't work out well, because I've learned more from the situations where I screwed up. One of the things that's not really part of this, but I kind of make it part of this, is the ability to laugh at yourself. So if you totally screw it up, don't, joke about it. Make a joke out of it. Laugh about it. Tell the person what you're trying to do. Say, I was just working on my emotional intelligence. And they'll look at you like, what's that? You say, do you know what that is? And that gives you an opportunity to talk to them about it. All right, so let me put this last slide up here and talk about something that I want to talk about. This is where I work. Eastern New Mexico University College of Business. That's my email right above that if you have any questions or anything. ENMU.edu is our website, obviously. I work in the College of Business, but we offer all kinds of degrees here. And we would really like for you to check us out. We're kind of the quiet sibling in the New Mexico university system, and we're okay with that because we really like to get by on our record, to tell you the truth. And when you look at our graduates, we're very, very proud of our graduates in all fields, from everything from pre-med to business to art. And we have a huge education program. So please check us out. We love students, we love parents, we love meeting you guys, and we would love for you, if you're looking for something to do, come visit Portales, visit the campus, let us know you're coming, and we will give you a tour, we'll get you whatever you need, help you find a place to stay and all that stuff. So please come visit Portales and Eastern, check out our website, enmu.edu, and if you have any questions about my presentation or anything about me, please feel free to email me, bob.schneider@enmu.edu. And thank you all for your attention. I very much appreciate this.